Everybody, welcome to Cultivating Change Within Your Company, a conversation on how to handle change. Emily Altman and I, Lynn Zimmerman, are going to be leading this discussion, and I'll let Emily introduce herself today.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm Emily, and I'm the CEO and relationship coach at the Couples Workshop, where I really focus on providing solutions to couples in a more short-term form of therapy. My focus with them is to implement change very quickly. So I do that by leveraging clients' strengths. I'm also fortunate enough to have most of my clients be business owners. So I have a unique perspective on implementing change both on an individual level and also then what they communicate to their companies.
And I'm Lynn Zimmerman. I have been a communication strategist for several Fortune 500 companies, and I've been a part of more than 50 corporate acquisitions and multiple major systems integrations and outsourcing programs. So my background, I have a strong background in communicating strategic change within businesses. My passion is helping small businesses that are growing continue to grow and maneuver through those changes. I am an accredited business communicator from the International Association of Business Communicators, and I am the owner of Swing Strategic Communication.
So our presentation will go through the following topics. We will first discuss how to prepare yourself and your company for change. Then we'll discuss reaching your stakeholders, followed by creating your specific messages for your specific company, identifying those obstacles that will inevitably come up during change, how to measure your success, and then our final thoughts and some tools and takeaways for you.
So starting out, we're preparing for change. What can we as business owners do to prepare ourselves and our team for change within our businesses?
My first thought with this, Lynn, is really focusing on yourself as the business owner. You are the very first piece of change. And to most effectively communicate that change, you have to be in a good place to then communicate it. I always suggest really focusing on your personal strengths surrounding change and also really acknowledging your company's strengths. The big takeaway here, because of course I'm sure you're like, yes, of course, I understand I need to know my strengths. But my suggestion to add on to that is to be realistic and to be honest about your strengths. So it's not what you hope to achieve or what you hope to be strong at, but really taking a look and reflecting on those strengths that you have. A previous client comes to mind. He had a business and he was selling it for retirement. And of course, it came up a lot in our time together in therapy. Him and his wife had started this business. They've grown this business. And to then pass that business along while still keeping that team intact was a challenge for him as a business owner. The big thing here for them was that it was a family company and their team had like an average time within the company of 10 years. So the team was very focused on one another. They had this culture of supporting one another, of adapting through that time. And that's how we found out that you can utilize that team. He felt like he had to take on all that responsibility. And thankfully for him, he had that support from his family and from his employees that we could utilize to our advantage.
That's so important, using all of the resources that you have available to you to help manage change.
Yeah.
And having measurable objectives is another really important thing to do. Look at why you want to do this change. Why is this change important to your business? Is it necessary for your business? And how do you know when you've been successful? So looking at, setting clear, measurable goals at the very beginning, so you have something to go toward, and you have something to say, look back and say, okay, we've achieved what we had hoped to achieve from the beginning. Because without that roadmap, you're more likely to make mistakes and have issues that might hurt your business more than help your business. And obviously when we're going through a change, it's always with growth in mind and with improving your business. So making sure that you have a way to track your progress is really important.
Huge. That's huge.
So reaching your stakeholders, knowing who your stakeholders are throughout your change is critical to the success. And, when you start thinking about the change, you might think, oh, this is really going to affect my employees. But then if you don't look past that, you're going to miss some people. So, I always do with my clients a detailed stakeholder analysis. So we sit down, we look at every group that your company touches, your customers, your employees, your contractors, your vendors, and how does it affect each of them, and how do we want those people to react to the change? So we want to look at, I call them your desired behaviors. How do you want your employees to act once this change is taking place? Do you want them to help? Do you want them just to accept the change? And then we also look at, how do we think they're going to react? Are they going to react negatively? Are they going to be excited about this change? Are they going to want to jump in? Are they going to be confused? So we really want to understand who those stakeholders are through a detailed analysis. So again, there's no surprises as you go through the change, and you're better equipped to make it a smooth transition.
Yeah, I think that's such a huge point. When you were talking about these specific behaviors you want your team to have, it makes me think of how in business, of course, we have our ideal target market or ideal client. And it's almost as if you have that same mentality for your target market as your target employee or your team. Of course, if your team's already established, that's set. And if you're considering growing your team, I would then suggest, what does that team look like? How do you implement these behaviors that you want them to have? What else goes into that? What do they do in their spare time? How do they react to this change? What do they do outside of work? It's the same mentality that you put towards your targeting and for your marketing that you can then use as a strength within your organization.
Absolutely. Employees are just as important to understand and know who they are as your customers are, because, your employees keep your business running. If they aren't on board with your change, you're going to have problems, to say it lightly.
Right.
And so and oftentimes businesses forget that, they just assume, since their employees, most of us have happy employees, they know, your employees work for you because they believe in what you're doing. But change is hard. And so when you announce a change, they may not be on board. They may not understand. They may be concerned that their job is at risk because you're making changes. And so knowing and nurturing them through the change process is just as important as telling your customers why you're changing.
Yes.
Even more so.
Sure. Yeah.
So as far as communicating, again, understanding who you're communicating to is also going to help you determine how to communicate, what methods, is it just an email? Is it a press release? Is it a marketing plan? Brochures and advertising, so knowing who you need to communicate to will help you determine how to communicate to your stakeholders.
All right, creating your messages. How often do I need to communicate?
So again, you've done your stakeholder analysis, you know who you're communicating to, and then from there you're going to be able to figure out how often. With any change, communicate as early as possible. I always, when I work with company leaders, talk to them about being open, honest, and timely. Understanding that there are certain things that you can't say depending on the type of company you have. If you have a public company, there's obviously, you have your shareholders that you need to worry about, and there's timing issues. If you're doing a layoff, there are issues around that, when you can communicate. And so, but you want to get ahead of the rumors. That's the biggest thing with any change, is people are going to start to know something's up. And so my goal when I work with my clients is to help them communicate as soon as possible and as openly and as honestly as possible, because people know when you're not being authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
the rumor mill runs quickly. And
Yeah.
you want to try to stay ahead of any negative information that you can. And when you bring people in and let them and trust them with the information, they're going to accept that change more, because they know you've trusted them with a lot of big information.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, how people resonate with authenticity, whether that's a one-on-one message or a mass message. Being open and honest and realistic is such a huge point to have that connection in order to have the buy-in for change.
Exactly. And, bringing in certain people, as you do your analysis, you're going to say,
Mm-hmm.
this person is really going to be able to help us with this change. And so bringing in key people throughout your organization,
Yeah.
if you have some very trustworthy people that can help with that, and, maybe your employees love a certain manager, then that manager can help with the change. So it's identifying who can help you and who can make this run more smoothly.
Yeah, interesting. I'd love to know your thoughts on this next one about communicating these different messages for different stakeholder groups. Because for me, obviously, it's more of a one-on-one piece, and I have to customize that on an individual level. And yet I don't have that mass perspective.
So when you look at your messages, you're going to have, the basics, the who, what, where, when, why. That's where I always start. Who is changing, what is changing, when is it changing? That's the basic framework I start with. But then you're going to look at, for different stakeholders, the different parts of that message may be more important. So your employees may be more concerned about the who is it going to affect. Your customers may think, well, when is this change happening, and how is that going to affect? And so you may have different messages for different groups. You're going to have your key messages, your top, this is what's happening, this is when it's happening, but you're going to tailor those messages to speak to your different stakeholder groups based on how you feel like each of those stakeholder groups are going to react to the change.
Interesting. So it's more of really knowing those specific groups individually to see how your main message needs to adapt to communicate to them.
Absolutely. And, it may be that with some groups, you only communicate one time. They just need an email that says, hey, this is happening, and they'll be fine with it. They just need to know. There's other groups that you might need to really ease them into this transition. So, with employee groups that I've worked with, for example, working with an outsourcing program where we were taking jobs and moving them somewhere else. And we did frequent town hall meetings. We talked, with small groups of employees to tell them about the change and to prepare them for what was happening. And so they would know each step of the way what was going on. And that wasn't just a one-time deal. It was we would do monthly meetings with them. We would follow up with an email, just because we knew we needed to keep them engaged throughout the change, because we needed work to continue until we could move the work to its new location. So it's helping people understand what's going on. They may not like what is going on, which leads us into our next, the last question in this. But you're a business owner, and so you've got to keep the business producing. And with any change, there's always going to be that downturn of productivity because people are uncertain of what's happening. But you want to try to limit that as much as you can, with effective communication and frequent communication to the certain groups that need it.
Sure. So what about customers specifically? I know I keep sticking on this point, but I love your point of view. When you communicate specifically to different customer groups, and of course it depends on each different organization, how often do you think on average those communications need to go out to the customer base?
It really depends on how big the change is and how much it affects the customer. If you are changing your product that the customer is purchasing from you, then they need to be aware, because it might be something that, will affect their operations. So, with that, then I would treat it like I talked about with the outsourcing program, where you are doing town hall meetings, or even sending your salespeople out to meet with them one-on-one. Really, again, it's going to be it depends on the situation, but if it really affects them and can affect their livelihood, then they need to be prepared for when the change happens. To go back to the example of the outsourcing, ultimately in that situation, it didn't affect our customers directly, aside from the fact that the information that they were receiving from us would be coming from a different location.
Gotcha.
So, we let them know, because there is sensitivity around moving jobs from one place to another, people losing their jobs. It's uncomfortable for a lot of people. So we wanted to make sure that they were aware of what was happening, but ultimately the product that they were receiving from us was going to be the same thing. They wouldn't notice any changes. So this is why you want to do that detailed audience analysis, so you can think through all of the things that you need to know about each audience that's being affected. You need to really look at each of those in a detailed way. So
yeah, for sure.
So I'm interested in hearing from you about how you work with when you get pushback. What strategies do you use to help combat that pushback?
Yeah. So for me, of course, it's different on an individual level than in a business, because my job is to find that individual piece. However, for business owners, I would challenge them to adapt to that individual a bit, to get a feel for what's going on. Because of course, if one employee is having an experience, it's likely another one is also experiencing something similar or the same. So when there's pushback, to me, that doesn't always just say defiance or something negative. I always try to reframe that as, okay, something's not working. So from there, I like to identify what I always call the triangle of change. So if you think of a triangle, obviously we all know the shape of a triangle. You have behaviors and thoughts and emotions on one side. When you can change one piece of the triangle, essentially you're changing the shape of that triangle. And that means you're changing the entire system. So for example, if you have someone who is pushing back, what are you trying to communicate with the change? Is it a thought change? Are you changing the way you're doing marketing? Then perhaps you're trying to change the way people think within your company. Or are you trying to change behaviors? Maybe there's a new system that you're implementing and there's pushback there. I challenge you then to try to identify which piece of the triangle you are currently working at with that individual. And perhaps that means you can change one of the other sides to then still get the same outcome. So perhaps let's say you are focused on changing thoughts. You're trying to change some targeting perhaps. And that comes with different language that you then share with your customer base. Instead of it being just the thought process, perhaps there are some behaviors that employee can do. So perhaps that means you're changing your target market to men. Can they then, try to have a more masculine sense in the office, or I guess traditionally masculine sense? Or, what are these specific behaviors that you can do that still are tied to those thoughts that will still have the same outcome for you?
Yeah, that's very similar to what I do as well. Is we're looking at individual, there are a lot of changes that a lot of people are going to be fine with it. They just need more information as long as you communicate with them. But there's always going to be that person that's like, I'm not going to change. I'm
right.
And there is a point as a business owner where you need to decide, is this person in the future of the company?
Yes.
There's a lot of hard decisions that come with change. And I always think about the book Good to Great, blanking on the name of the author, but he talks about the bus, and that when you are moving your company forward, you want people on the bus who believe in where you're going. They want to go with you where, and there's going to be some people who along the way need to get off the bus. And so that's part of this change process, is identifying, if this person is going to make the change harder than necessary, if they're not willing to change, if they're not open to change, are they part of your future?
Right.
In the company?
Yeah, for sure. All right. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go. Yeah. So, identifying obstacles, like we just alluded to, there's going to be some obstacles to change, and having a strong plan is going to help you avoid some of the major obstacles, hopefully. And looking, knowing who your audiences are. I go back to my stakeholder analysis. If you know who you're talking to, if you know who is going to be affected by the change, then you can start thinking about what obstacles you might face with those people. Because if you know that, you've got an employee group that has used this program for 20 years, and they have, they love this program, they think it's the best thing in the world, and you want to take that away. And so you know that there's going to be some resistance there. And so that's, again, planning, knowing what can I do, what are the things that I can do, who are the people that I can use to give the message that will help them ease into this change and be more open to it. They may not be happy, but the point is not to make everybody happy, it's to make them accept the change and help move forward, because happiness can't be your goal for everybody.
Right. Yeah, that's huge. The the only point I have that almost balances that, I see your point, and that's huge because a company is a system. And what you're saying is if there's one piece of that system that's not working, you have to think of the system as a whole and let that piece go. It's important for the future of the company to implement this change successfully. At the same time, I think it's a fine balance where if you are trying to create this culture of change, this later question, if you're trying to create a culture of change within your company, then what are you communicating when you do give up too quick? And of course, that's not what you're saying. But if you are quick to fire, or if you are quick to punish your employees in any way, when there is a little delay in the change, then I'm wondering what that communicates to your team. To me, if you also work with them in this transition and understand that it is a fluid process for your team to get on board, to me, that's a really successful way of communicating that change and therefore creating a culture of change within your company. When you can lead that by example, when you can adapt, when you can understand that it is a fluid process, that's helping create that culture of change, not just for this specific change that you're making within the company, but all the other changes that will happen in the future as any company will inevitably have.
I think that's a great point, that, helping people understand that we're growing. We
Yeah,
want change. Change is a good thing
right.
because we are, we're growing, we're making more money, we're all being rewarded by the efforts. And that's, I think, creating that culture, and culture is so important, having an established vision, an established mission and values that you talk about consistently. I worked for a leader when I was a director of corporate communications at a company called IHS. His name was Jerry Stead, and he was brilliant at really living his values and making that so important. Every communication we sent out, we tied it back to one of our values. Because if it didn't tie back to one of our values, then why were we doing it? Because it didn't help move us forward in
Mhm.
living our values. And so, as a leader, you need to make sure that you are telling your employees why your company exists. What is our goal as a company? What is our mission? Because if they understand that, then any change that comes becomes easier for them to understand, because it fits within that culture, your
Yes.
company culture. Without a really clear vision, then it's hard to communicate change,
Hmm.
because
Yes.
your employees might be blindsided because they don't see the connection of why we're going from point A to point B. But
Yeah. Right. Especially when it is so hard to change. You're not going to tell me why I have to do something. I'm good. I just want to keep doing the things that I'm doing. And it helps to with those like outside conversations then. Of course, then they're going to leave the meeting, or after they read the email, they're going to go talk to their friends within the organization. And when you can tie this value piece, it adds that added layer of motivation to accomplish that change. I think that's such a huge point.
yeah, it makes a big difference. If people have
Mhm.
bought into your vision, then change is so much easier to explain, because
Yeah.
they know, well, this is going to help us, this is going to help us get to, make the best widgets in the world, or whatever your vision is.
Right.
You're it's a clear pathway. But if you don't have a clear vision, then any change is probably going to be a surprise. And the more established your company is, and the longer somebody has done something in a certain way or used a certain tool, that's hard. And some people are more adaptable to change than others. We're all different. And so you have to take that into consideration as you change. But ultimately, you have to remember that people are working for you and your business because they believe in you. as a
Yes.
leader. And
Yes.
so, the communication, even in times when you're not making changes, is important, so that when you have a time of change, that they know what to expect. They know that you're going to be open. They know that you're going to be honest, and they
Mhm.
know that you're going to give them a clear path forward.
Yeah, huge. That trust is huge. I jumped ahead to the culture, but I'm wondering if you had any other points on identifying these obstacles.
So again, it goes back, I keep talking about this stakeholder analysis, is that when you talk about, so we sit down and we say, okay, here's our employees, and trying to think of an example. So the last company I was with, this outsourcing project, we sat down and we looked at employees, and a lot of the employees, it was a 50-year-old company, very stagnant, not a lot of change. And we had people who had worked for the company for almost 50 years, and they went from scanning things onto microfiche to scanning it into a computer. But that was really that was the major change within the company. And then we were asking them to make a very dramatic change, where we were moving some of the work overseas. And so, there was a lot of resistance to that throughout the company. We were also at the same time acquiring more than 50 companies, growing from 2,500 employees to over 6,000 employees. It was a time of, and we also went public. So there was lots of major changes going on in a very, very short period of time. And so we had these employees who showed up to work every day for 50 years, doing the same job with the same people. And we're now asking them to change with the same systems, and now when you acquire companies, obviously you acquire systems, and we were consolidating. So again, lots and lots of change. And so when we did the stakeholder analysis, we identified that. We said, here's who our employees are. We know that they really love this system, and they're going to do whatever they can to hold on to this system. And so what are the strategies, again, to, we knew, based on talking to their managers, to, consultants, we brought in lots of really smart people to help us with this. But we kind of knew where they were going to resist the most, and what kind of roadblocks they could put in place, because one of the things we identified, because they could just refuse to not use the new system.
Right.
And that's hard. So what do? We can't just shut it down because it's got information in there, but we need them to transition. And so, so you have to look at things from here's point A, we want to get to point B. What are the things that they could do? What are the, so again, it's really sitting down with people who are people from throughout your organization, managers, people you can trust to help you kind of walk through the process. And, you have to be very open-minded. You can't go in it with a Pollyanna sort of view. You have to look at, if I wanted to stop this, what could I do? So it's taking the time, having your measurable objective, where do we want to get to, what kind of result do I want, and then saying, where are the landmines, what could happen as we change. And it's very unique to each type of change.
Right.
So, but you have to make the time. That's really so important. You can't just go into change and say, this is what I want to do. We're starting tomorrow. You need to take the time to really plan for it,
Right.
and have measurable goals and objectives for your change.
Right. As you're talking, I'm thinking about different sized businesses. So like a larger corporation versus a small business, well, even small to medium sized business. And I'm trying to think of different potential obstacles for each of those groups. And it's almost like these larger organizations, at least maybe stereotypically, have a lot more systems in place because it's a larger organization, typically with a lot more employees, right? So they need those systems that are already in place to keep that machine going, versus a smaller business who, of course, has systems in place, but maybe they're not as systematic, or they are more individual person based on the specific job, or like your aunt or uncle, or what, or whatever that might be. So it almost seems like those obstacles would vary versus it's more a system based or even a more personal base.
Absolutely. That's why taking the time to plan, makes sense, because it's unique to each business.
Right.
Small businesses may have just, as a small business owner, you're doing everything. And so it isn't necessarily the most efficient, but a lot of times it's easier just to keep doing things the same way as you've always done them, because takes time and effort and money to change or to bring somebody on and train them. And so it is, you do have to really look at what I'm trying to think here, to look at how it works best for your business, I guess, is, so again, take the time, bring somebody in to help you. For me, in my experience, when I've worked with managers who are trying to implement change, having somebody there like me to help walk them through the process, we can make progress a lot faster because they had somebody to talk through their thoughts and help them identify all of the things. And again, you're not going to be able to identify every obstacle that could come up. No. If you could figure that out, you'd be, if I could figure that out, I'd be really rich, to figure out obstacles, things that can cause problems. But taking the time to think it through will help you identify a lot of those issues and make your path to the change that you want to make a lot simpler.
For sure. All right, measuring success. How do you know you've been successful?
So with measuring success, we started out with our measurable objectives. And so at the end of a change, or throughout the change even, I would recommend having milestones that you're hoping to reach. And there's so many different ways to measure success. One is word of mouth. How are people acting toward you? Do you feel like not as measurable, but you can get a sense of how people are taking to the change? Surveying. So if you do a town hall, do a survey afterwards. Ask people how they're feeling. If you've got probably for a mid-sized business, surveying makes sense. Small, you can just do one-on-one meetings. Talk with them. You want to keep communication open. You want back and forth. Give them, tell them my door's open. Come in and talk to me about this. I want to address your concerns. They can email you. However your company communicates, you're going to know best how your employees and your customers and what the best way to communicate. But you just want to give people a way to give you feedback on the change.
I think the only thing I would add here too is also some type of internal tool. So whether you're just doing some reflection on your own personal levels of stress, how much are you taking work home, or are your work days still 12 hours long, right? So also what's going on for you. If it's harder to get a feel for your employees, you can also just look internally to see how you are interacting with them to get a good feel. I think just as humans, we're able to connect with other people. So you can use that to your advantage to get a feel for how things are going to.
Absolutely. I think if you, as the business owner, are not feeling comfortable about the change, then you can tell that your employees and your
No way.
customers are not feeling good about the change.
No.
So,
For sure.
and that's the time to reflect on, is the change the right change for your company? You know, I think that that's a really important point, is that you know, if you decide to make a change, you go through the planning, you can stop anytime you want. You know, you can change direction. Obviously you don't want to do that a lot, because that creates confusion. It creates, you know, uncertainty. But when you know that something isn't right, you need to be able to adjust to that. And again, planning, you know, be strategic about it. But you want to make sure that the end result is the right thing for your business. And, you know, nothing is set in stone. But with a good plan, you'll get to where you need to go.
For sure. Final thoughts.
Well, I think this has been, you know, a great conversation. You know, we want to hear from our audience. You know, what are, as business owners, what are the people watching, experiencing? You know, I think both of us have very unique perspectives on change and how it affects people in different ways. You know, I love your perspective as a therapist who works with business owners. You know, that's just such a you know, you kind of understand the business owner mindset.
Mhm.
And how they're thinking about, you know, growing their businesses, and the kind of stress that creates as
Right.
For people and business owners.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the big thing about change is just all the layers. And of course, as business owners, you take so much ownership, you take some guilt if it's not going well, and you have a lot of pressure to make it work well. So it's a fine balance of having you be in a good place, but also using tools to your advantage. So, like you're saying, getting these resources in that can help you implement change, using different tools, measuring that success to have as much control over the change as possible, when so much of it can be out of your hands. You're not quite sure how people are going to react. So setting the stage and setting yourself up for success in all the different avenues can help you achieve that goal, ideally faster, more effectively, etc.
Yeah, I think, you know, the one main point that I want to make sure gets across is, don't make change harder than it needs to be.
Mm,
Change is hard. You know, we all get comfortable, we all like the way we do things, and so
right.
when somebody asks us to change, it's hard. So don't make it harder. You know,
Yes.
know what you want to change, and be open, be honest, and give people the information that they need to accept the change. And, you know, you're going to find that it really is not as big of a deal as you thought it was going to be, and that people will come along with you if you have a clear vision for that change.
For sure. Well, if you have any questions about self-care, about how to manage your own stress, how to work with a resistant employee, I'm more than happy to address any concerns or questions you have regarding those topics. Here's my contact information. You can reach out to me directly, or if you just want to stay in touch and connect, my LinkedIn is there as well.
And here is my contact information as well. I'd love to hear from you. I do offer a template for strategic planning for change communication. So if you're interested in that, just send me an email and I'll send that out to you. I'd love to connect. And if you have any questions about how you can make changes in your business, I'd love to hear from you.
Thanks so much for tuning in with us today.
Thank you.
Bye.